So thanks for having me. It's good to be back. The last time that I did it, like 3 or 4 months ago, Todd and I presented on kind of like building your balance sheet, investing in real estate. I got into a little bit into the weeds on, when you're investing in rental properties, all the tax advantages that come with that for real estate professionals, which you all are. Today, is kind of like bigger picture. I thought we could maybe walk through just LLCs. I'm sure you guys run into that either personally or with some of your clients that are investing through LLCs. Ben had asked me to kind of walk through the strategy with being organized or being taxed as an S corporation. Some of you may already be set up that way, but there is some advantage to doing that. And then really just kind of talking about some general tax deductions that you need to be thinking about. It's really close to tax time, and arguably, like, if you don't act on some of those things by the end of the year, you sort of lose the opportunity for 2023. And then the last thing is really just, kind of thinking beyond reinvesting in real estate and kind of looking at what retirement plans might be at your disposal, because I think, that's probably a common goal that we all share, is to eventually, maybe not work at the level that we're working now and set your finances up for retirement. Cool. But I don't want to talk the whole time, so just if you have a question, just interrupt me and let's talk about it. But I'm hopeful that I spend 20 minutes or so on this, and we can just open up to Q&A. Just a little plug on the firm. I'm with Canal Capital Management. We've got one office. It's downtown. We do a lot for our clients beyond just like tax planning and financial planning. We've got about $1 billion of assets under management that we manage for a bunch of different families. And we've got no plans to change it. It's employee owned. Just a younger group that's growing. Here's our pretty pictures. I am a CPA and a CFP, so if you have a question that you've been thinking about related to finances, investments, taxes, like, now is your opportunity to ask it. So it's fair game. And again, just a little bit of a plug on the firm. We just, as I said before, we do more than just taxes in-house. We do financial planning, investment management, and then I consider family office services kind of like that financial quarterback for a family. So what I said earlier, just let's go over an LLC, an S corporation, just some different tax deduction opportunities, and then let's end on retirement planning. Sound good? All right. So an LLC, right, is just a separate entity that divides an owner from a business, okay? So you have an owner of an LLC, but it's a separate entity that's organized under a state statute. So you can have a Virginia LLC, North Carolina LLC. Your LLC generally is in the state that your business is located. You can have multiple members of an LLC, and that would be a partnership, right? If you had, if Tommy and Cindy and I wanted to go together and invest in a property, we would form a multi-member LLC, or you can have a single member LLC. It's just one that I, own, or any of us own. People say, should I have an LLC or should I not have an LLC? Because from a tax perspective, just having an LLC doesn't really change your taxes. All the income still flows through the LLC to the owner or owners of that entity. But I think this last bullet point is kind of, in some ways, it increases the credibility of what you're doing. If you're starting a small business, to have it organized as an LLC kind of adds some level of legitimacy to the business kind of from day one. But when you have an LLC, you want to have a separate bank account set up, kind of really respect that structure, and flow all the activity of that business through the LLC accounts. One of the main benefits of the LLC is, like I mentioned with the legal division, is it protects you as the owner from the LLC and all the other assets that you have from potential claims of creditors. So with an LLC, if there was a lawsuit and someone was kind of trying to sue your LLC, your exposure would be limited to whatever assets that LLC owns, not reach beyond those assets and get, other, assets that you may have kind of outside of that LLC. So, so that's kind of the LLC in a nutshell. When it comes, and obviously we've got to translate this back to real estate, but when it comes to investing in real estate, there's a lot of different, or there are a number of different ways you can do it. You can just buy a rental property in your name. You could set up A single LLC that owns all your rental properties, probably not. The best way to do it is to set up kind of multiple LLCs for each of your different properties. And I don't want to overcomplicate this, but basically, like if you've got LLC 1, 2, and 3, each of those owns one property. If something terrible happened at property 1, and you know, and you had a lawsuit against you, you don't want the person that's suing you over property 1 to be able to reach over and grab anything related to property 2, 3, or any of your other investments, okay? So usually we recommend that when you're using an LLC to invest in real estate, you don't have multiple properties under one entity. You really go kind of this LLC, or have multiple LLCs that flow up to a parent LLC, and then that's what you do. Any questions on that? All right, so.
Well, I guess one small question. To create an LLC, I mean, you're talking like, it's like $100.
Yeah, you can go online, and in 10 minutes, you could go on the Virginia State Corporation Commission website and have an LLC set up, you know, by the time this class ends. And then once you have that LLC set up, you have to get an EIN, which is an employer identification number. It's basically just like a social security number for a business. That's free to do on the IRS's website, but it's that easy.
Yeah, so in terms of having one per property in that scenario, it's not really, it's not like large expense, it's more just like.
That's right. That's exactly right. And if you're the sole owner of each of those LLCs, you don't have to file separate tax returns and things like that. It's just, you know, from a legal standpoint, you know, kind of isolating that liability. So everybody heard of S Corp? I've heard people say, I run my business as an S Corp. It saves me all this money. Okay, so an S Corp is not it's not like you go and you, on the State Corporation Commission website, you say, I don't want an LLC, I want to sign up as an S Corp. That's not the way that it works. You either have an LLC or you have a corporation, and the S Corp election is simply a choice that you have on how you're taxed. So an S Corp starts as typically an LLC, and then you make this tax election to kind of layer on a different kind of set of tax rules. And really, at its core, what an S Corp does, let's think about a realtor at Hometown Realty that gets paid $100,000 of commissions, okay? Instead of taking those commissions into your personal checking account, you could set up an LLC, have it taxed as an S corporation. That same $100,000 of commissions comes into that, but you say, I'm an employee of this S corporation, and I'm gonna pay myself a wage, which is less than the $100,000 that's coming in. I'm gonna pay myself a reasonable wage. Let's just say it's $3,000 or $4,000 a month. Okay, that's gonna come through just like a paycheck, just like if you went and worked at, for somebody else as a W-2 employee. But then anything beyond that is still my money. I'm still entitled to take it but it's profits of the S Corp, and that profit is taxed at a lower rate because you get to avoid the FICA taxes, Social Security and Medicare, which can be as high as 15.3%. Okay, so that is it. All an S Corp means from a tax savings standpoint is you have bifurcated your total compensation into wages and profit. Wages are taxed at the highest rates, just like if you don't have an S Corp or an LLC or anything like that, you get whacked at the highest rates, and the profits are taxed at a lower tax rate. Any questions on that? Okay.
How do you determine the $3,000 or $4,000 that you just said there?
That's the hard part.
Wouldn't you do like $2,000?
Right, because you want that wage part that we just all agreed you get taxed at the highest rate on. You want that to be as low as reasonably possible without, triggering an audit or raising red flags. And there's no black and white test, right? Some days you couldn't pay me enough to do my job, and other days I love it so much that, I just do it because I enjoy my life, my day-to-day. But so there's not a way to like black and white, test that. A lot of people will go back and say, start with 40% or 50% of what you expect to earn, you know, and you kind of bifurcate it that way. And the thing is, once your earnings, once that top line revenue goes up, you don't necessarily always have to keep it at 50%. So you're sort of creating if you start, you know, early, you could kind of justify a little bit of a lower W-2 wage base, bump that up each year a little bit, kind of cost of living, but you don't have to always keep it at 50% of whatever your business is doing.
I was going to note that when you helped me with this years and years ago, one thing that's really helpful, especially if you're newer, is if you have a budget and you're working your budget now, you can almost set your salary based on what you need, right? And then anything on top of that is distributions. But it also really helps you down the road, like living below your means. If you make more, you can keep your salary somewhat conservative compared to what you're earning. And it helps you budget and be disciplined.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, it's all your money, right? It's all commission checks that you earned. You know, it's just you're setting, as Ben said, kind of a monthly amount. Hopefully, it jives with what you need to live your life, pay all your bills, and anything above and beyond that, again, is still your money. But that's kind of discretionary money that you can take out, save, hopefully, you know, and you know, build wealth over time if you're kind of living on that salary piece.
Yeah, so that salary number, at least the way I heard, was more like how much you would pay a salary for somebody to do everything that you're doing. So
Right.
to replace you, how much would you have to pay somebody?
Right.
Where
And again, some days it's like the number's really, really high. Some days it's not, it doesn't feel as high.
But then I've also had concerns with like all of a sudden you make a whole lot and you're still only paying yourself $40,000 a year.
Yeah. Like
my brother makes a whole lot, and I think he probably pays himself, you know, $40,000. It's probably gonna get you in trouble.
Yeah. So there's this concept. It's called the Social Security wage base, and once you've paid in on a W-2, like around $150,000, if somebody's making a lot of money, you stop paying into Social Security. So a lot of practitioners will say, in a situation like what you just described, as long as you pay yourself a W-2 above that Social Security wage base, you kind of fall pretty low on the audit risk because Social Security has gotten everything that they kind of want to get from you as an individual taxpayer.
Well, and that's part of this discussion too, right? If you pay yourself pennies, you're essentially robbing yourself from potential Social Security.
That's a really good point. That's a really good point. You know, so the less you pay in, right? We're talking about a strategy where you're paying in intentionally sort of less to Social Security, you know, along the way. Which, as you know, at anywhere between 62 and 70, hopefully we'll all be able to turn that back on, you know, and start getting Social Security checks. So you're right. I mean, some people say, you know, I don't think Social Security is even going to be there. It's not going to be there at the level that it is today, so I'm not going to bank on getting all this money back out of Social Security. And then I've seen instances where people wait until 70 to get this huge Social Security benefit, and I had a guy last summer that got 2 checks, you know, and so he never got back a fraction of what he'd actually paid into the system. So, you know, there's pros and cons, right, to doing it each way. But that's it. I mean, basically what you're doing is you're taking your commissions and you're saying, I'm not just going to take them all in my checking account. I'm going to bifurcate this. I'm going to set up a business that receives all those commissions, and I'm going to pay myself a wage, and then I'm going to take profits. The wages get taxed pretty heavily. The profits get taxed less. There's no black or white way to determine what that split is. You got to kind of think about what your future earnings are going to be from that business and start somewhere and adjust as needed. So that's what I just said, basically. An S-Corp is not its own separate entity. It's just simply a tax election that you layer on top of an LLC or corporation. It's a really simple form. It's called a 2553 you file. Like, again, you know, with $100 and about 30 to 45 minutes of time, you can get it all set up. All right, so this is one of my favorite quotes, Shaq. Last time I looked at the paycheck, I said to myself, who the hell is FICA? And when I meet him, I'm going to punch him in the face. Oh my God, FICA is killing me, right? So remember, FICA is Social Security and Medicare, right? So let's just say you don't have an S-Corp, you don't have this structure set up. You get paid your real estate commissions, you write off your mileage and your home office, and you write off all the things you write off, and then you come up with a net figure that you're going to pay taxes on. Well, you pay ordinary income taxes, just like we all do, and then as a business owner, because that's what you all are, you pay these FICA taxes, and that's an extra 15.3% in taxes. So, I mean, pretty quickly, you know, you guys sitting in this room can get into the, you know, 30, 35, 40% tax rate on those initial dollars that you're making, you know, very, very fast.
And then you're saying plus 15.3 on top of your bank.
That's right. That's right. So here's an example. Let's just say you sit in this room, you made $70,000 after you'd written off anything that you had to write off from your real estate business. Okay? You're gonna pay income tax on that $70,000, and then you're gonna pay FICA taxes. And this is assuming, this first column is assuming you don't have the S-Corp structure set up. Total tax, $24,000 on 70. I mean, that's a lot, right? That's a pretty high percentage. Now, let's just say you did go through the work and you set up this S corporation. Same $70,000 came in, that didn't change. But instead, you paid yourself $3,000 a month W-2 wages, and you got the rest as profit, right? You pay the same income tax because you still have $70,000 of income. It's just kind of coming through two different ways. Instead of paying FICA tax on the full 70, you're only paying FICA taxes on this 36, right? So this FICA tax savings is over $5,000. So just by having this structure, this setup, you've saved in that 1 year on this $70,000 of income, $5,000 in taxes. Any questions?
And that just requires a separate business tax return as soon as you go export.
Yep.
You can have LLCs and not require a separate
That's,
tax return.
if it's a single member LLC, it doesn't require a separate tax return, but when you make the S election, you have to file. And that's one of the disadvantages. You have to file a separate tax return, pay somebody to probably prepare that for you. You have to run payroll too, so that's kind of a $25 to $50 a month probably fee. So there's definitely some administrative costs associated with the S Corp setup, but they don't exceed, in this example, $5,000 a year. You know, that there is real savings to drive. And I go back to like $5,000 a year. If you just save $5,000 a year for 40 years, that's $200,000 of total savings. If that money earns 7%, it'd be over $1 million at the end of that period. So somebody that's sitting in this room that's like in their 20s, or early 30s, it's worthwhile to kind of jump on this if you see a path to, you know, being self-employed, running your real estate business for a long amount of time. Any questions on the S Corp? Ben?
When is it a good time to look into setting up an S corporation? At what point? Income wise, how long you been in?
Yeah, so usually, usually I find that between kind of, because there are some costs associated with it, right? You have to file a separate tax return, you have to have payroll, you're probably gonna need QuickBooks and things like that. Usually I find kind of between $60,000 and $80,000 of annual income. Like if you're on a path to sort of make that consistently going forward, it's a good time to start the conversation and just kind of understand the mechanics. And then sort of 80 to 100 is probably where you go ahead and you start to take action. You know, and I know y'all's businesses, I mean, they can go like this. You know, there can be some really great years, but I think once you've been in the business kind of a year or two, you sort of, you know, start to establish what, like, you know, maybe a floor is in your mind, you know, or you start to establish a clearer path to being above that level consistently, you know, in the future. So,
is there ever a scenario where the S Corp doesn't save you money, or?
It really, that really depends on how much, there can be, if one of your goals is to try to pull away as much as possible into tax deferred retirement plans, there can be scenarios, but I'm talking like when you get into wanting to put, you know, over $100,000 annually into a retirement plan. Sometimes your percentages that you can get into a plan like that are better when you're not in school. All right. So, all right, it's the end of the year, right? Everybody's gonna be filing their taxes hopefully in the next few months. This is not like a one-size-fits-all set of recommendations, but I think I actually dusted this off from something I did a few years ago, and I think I read through them all, and they all still very much apply, so I just included this in there. You know, hire your kids, right? For a single filer, you know, they can make up to, gosh, $12,000, $13,000 and not have to pay any taxes on it. You know, just, there has to be a real job. Like, I get all these questions about, like, hey, you know, my infant, I really want to pay them to, you know, be a model for my company and then put it into a Roth IRA. Like, great idea. I think it was on somebody's Instagram post and it went viral. But I would say, like, if you hire your kids, you can absolutely do it. You just need to give them real jobs in your business. Even my kids, it's hard to justify that they do anything productive, period. You know, travel, I mean, the mileage or some kind of write-off related to your vehicles is probably one of you all's largest expenses in any given year, right? You're on the road, you're driving. Keep track of it. There's a bunch of different apps you can use to track mileage. You know, you could even buy a car or buy a vehicle and put it in service in the name of your business. I mean, a lot of people will do that. You know, you can either take your mileage deduction or you can take your actual expenses, including writing off the vehicle itself. It just depends on how you drive vehicles, right? If you plan to have a vehicle for a long time and you get pretty good gas mileage, you're probably better off over an extended period of time to just take a mileage deduction. But that's not the case for everybody. There are situations where it makes sense to have a business vehicle placed in service. 179 in bonus depreciation, basically that's just the ability for you to write off you know, purchases that you make that are kind of more capital in nature. So like if you have to buy a new computer, a new phone, you know, anything, headset, like anything for your business, you can write off in that first year. You don't have to take extended depreciation on it. Filing on time, you know, just wouldn't, I mean, it happens, you know, circumstances come up that delay, and you know, you can always file an extension, but you really want to do whatever you can to pay all the taxes that you have to pay, you know, by April 15th, which is the filing deadline. I mean, I will say we've been in this extremely low interest rate environment, and, you know, the IRS starts to accrue penalties and interest for you know, any taxes that are past due. In the past, you know, really almost decade, when interest rates were low, that's what the IRS is also charging, right? So the penalties and interest on underpayment weren't terrible, but now that interest rates are higher, you know, you just want to try to stay on top of it. I mean, Ben and I have talked in the past, like, you know, rule of thumb, and I think he tells new agents, you know, just whatever commission checks you're getting, try to set aside 30%. It's probably going to be too much, but if you do that, you're not going to get kind of bit on not having enough money to pay your taxes, since you are self-employed and a business owner and responsible for all the taxes on your commissions. Choose the right business structure. I mean, that's just what we talked about. You know, at what point is that S corp, you know, right for you? That's what a lot of real estate professionals are using for their real estate commissions, you know, to save a little bit on FICA taxes. Todd and I went into a lot of detail on investing in real estate, but it's a unique opportunity for you all in the room. You know, if you're investing in rental real estate, there are write-offs that can be used to offset other income. There's bonus depreciation. We went through that cost segregation study, you'll remember, where you don't take the house itself and depreciate it over time. You kind of look for, hey, I've got bathroom vanities, and I've got kitchen cabinets, and I've got countertops. Remember that thing that I went through and showed you guys? You really you break down a house into its components, and you take the depreciation faster on those certain components to offset other income. You don't have a ton of control over this, you know, but the age-old strategy to reduce taxes is accelerate your deductions and defer your income, right? I mean, you don't want to run the risk that a house doesn't close and it gets pushed in the next year, but it's not the worst thing from a tax perspective if you kind of, you know, pay something early and delay the recognition of income. And then the last thing is put money into a retirement account, right? I'm almost I'm past my 20 minutes that I told myself I was going to have. And then retirement planning, that's a big component. So that between the mileage and the retirement account, I would say for most folks in this room, those should be kind of the two biggest write-offs, you know, your vehicle expense and setting some money away for retirement. It's interesting, I mean, about half of people have actually sat down and calculated, like gone through that financial planning process and seen how much do I actually need to have saved by the time I retire? Like, what's my number, right? You see all those Fidelity commercials. It's like, what is that number that I need so if it didn't work, I can sort of live off of it for the rest of my life? You know, the other thing we hear is that, like, I'm young. Like, why am I going to think about this? And the reason that you think about this goes back to that $5,000 a year I showed you saved for 40 years is like over $1 million. It's amazing. So the first example is this girl, Susan. She's a great realtor. She invests $5,000 a year between 25 and 35, and then she stops. So she's invested $50,000 early. At 7% rate of return, she's got over $500,000. It's that gray line, the middle one, by the time she retires at 65. 50,000 in, over $500,000, just letting the market do its thing, real estate market, stock market, whatever you want, 7% returns. All right, Bill, he starts later. He's the green one. At 35, he starts investing $5,000 a year for 30 years. He never catches Susan, who started 10 years earlier and saved a third of the amount of total dollars. And then the best is Chris, which is what we just said, you know, at kind of 70,000 in commissions, the FICA tax savings will be $5,000, paints a really nice picture. Chris invests $5,000 a year between 25 and 65, same rate of return. He's invested $200,000 total dollars, and that's grown to just over $1 million. So, you know, the argument that I'm young, it doesn't really matter, I've got all these years to save, just look at how powerful it is when you are actually saving in those early years. And it's because of compound interest, right? That's the Einstein quote, the eighth wonder of the world is compound interest. He who understands it earns it, he who doesn't pays it. So start soon. I don't think I've ever met anybody that's been at retirement age that, you know, doesn't wish they had. Everybody wishes they'd started sooner because of that. And then it's like, what do I invest it in, right? There's all these different retirement plans. I could do a 401k, I could do a SEP IRA, I could do a Roth IRA. I mean, you're just kind of inundated with options. Which one's right for you? I would say most people in this room would go either the traditional IRA, the SEP IRA, Roth, or 401k route. It's probably, your retirement plan should be one of those four. The ones, the defined benefit and profit sharing plans, those are for companies that are trying to sock away per person $100,000, $200,000, like really, really big dollar amounts. They're great. They work really, really well, but you have to have a path to having a really high income for an extended number of years to be able to take advantage of those. And a simple IRA, that's kind of more suited for a small company, not just a solo kind of real estate agent. But it depends on your age, how much money you want to make, how much you want to save. You know, you may expect, but there's people that make a ton of money, but they spend a ton of money, and there's still not much left over to kind of put away in one of these vehicles. What your tax bracket is, and really kind of what that number, what your goal is for you know, retirement, and what your goals are for today. I kind of think of it more in terms of like, as a function of how much I really want to put away. So sort of on the left-hand side, you know, if you want to kind of contribute in the, you know, $5,000 to $6,000 a year range, and your income allows you to, the Roth IRA is the best asset to have. It's just you become, most of you will get to a point where you can't contribute directly to a Roth because you make too much money. So you're going to be phased out. So that's a great account to start early. You don't get a tax deduction for putting money in that retirement account, but it grows forever tax-free, and that is very, very, very powerful. It makes it the best asset of any of these, even better than having kind of an after-tax bucket as well. The rest of these, you do get a tax deduction for, so it's a pretty easy way to kind of reduce your taxable income. But the downside is, you know, when you go to withdraw that money in retirement, you're going to pay tax on every dollar that kind of comes back out of those accounts. And And so, as I mentioned, I kind of think of it more in terms of like what everybody here has kind of a different number that they can afford to save, you know, on an annual basis. If you're in kind of the $5,000 to $6,000 range, you probably want to go with a Roth or a traditional IRA. If you think something in the 20 to 40 range is where you might fall, the SEP IRA is it's called a self-employed person IRA. If you want to do sort of 50 plus but aren't quite ready for one of those defined benefit or the pension plans, having a solo 401k for your business would be reasonable. In all of these except the Roth, you get a tax deduction when you put money into it. So it's a pretty significant way to reduce your taxable income on an annual basis. Any questions? Well, hopefully, because that's it.
Well, I was just gonna comment, the reason why I would pay my kids money is so they have reportable income, so that I could put their money in a Roth.
That's right. Yep. That's a very,
That would be kind of the trick there, just to
that's
help
right.
them save up retirement money.
Absolutely. Right. Because I mean, look at that graph that I showed on the compound interest. Like the first Susan or whatever it was started at 25. I mean, imagine if a child was working a job and started at 15 even. I mean, that would be incredible over that, you know, kind of 30 or 40 year period. So any questions? I mean, financial
Aren't these
planning.
like percentage based too, based off your income?
What's that?
Aren't these maxed at like a percentage?
Yeah,
of
so
your
the
income,
SEP
or-
IRA typically works out to be like 18% if you're not, you know, if you're like a Schedule C filer or whatever your net profit is. The 401k, you can use like a lower W-2 on an S corp to actually get like the full amount in there, but your profit sharing is dependent on the W-2 wage. So yeah, it just, the intersection of how you've elected to be taxed and these limits does come into play. So again, it's just how much you intend on saving. You can kind of solve for what type of plan you want to have.
This might be, not a question for you, but, so the LLC, if you have somebody that is buying a house or whatnot, and they're like, well, I'll put an LLC after the fact, is there any like benefit to, or, I don't know, negative to doing it after the fact, after closing, instead of before? Do you know that?
No, I mean, the taxes don't really change, just having it in an LLC or not in an LLC. You know, I've even seen people that like will write contracts in their name, close on it in their name, and then just get whoever closes it to prepare a deed of transfer, like simultaneously at closing, so you don't have to, you know, mess with the contract. But no, there's no like, hey, but if I put it in an LLC, I'm gonna all of a sudden save all these taxes. The taxes really do work the same way. It's more just an asset protection.
Okay.
Speaking to that point a little bit, and I've learned, or I've encountered where with the LLCs for rentals, like you gotta own the property free and clear to put it in an LLC. Is that?
Yeah. So a lot of times, if you have a mortgage on it, the lender does not like.
Right. You can't buy it in an LLC.
Maybe. Yeah. Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
You either can't buy it in an LLC, or you can't say, hey, I bought this. This is my old house. I used to live there. I have a mortgage on it now. It's a rental property. I just want to put it into my LLC. I mean, I've never seen a note get called, but I think you probably could legally, you know, have a note called because the ownership is, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be the biggest risk. So for someone who's buying in their personal name and they're gonna finance it with an investment loan, if they want to 6 months later put it into a thing, I mean, that can be considered mortgage fraud. So the risk to that is having your note called.
Right.
Do immediately clause.
Right, yeah.
And I've seen people I've seen people kind of like that never come up, and I know that they've changed the deed,
And you
you
just
know.
don't know, yeah.
But you gotta be in a position where if that happens, you have to be able to refinance it pretty quickly, or, you know, pay off whatever the balance.
Well, it's like, obviously, if you own a rental in your own personal name, like, you just know the risk of that, right? It's not a bad thing to do that, you just know the risk of it, which
That's
is
right.
particularly if you get sued or whatever, but like, if you own a rental property in your own name, personal name, you should still run that and look at that as its own separate business. Like run a separate P&L for it, know what your budget is for
That's
that,
right.
just as if it's its own little deal.
Right. Yeah, because if you have, I mean, I've talked to a bunch of attorneys about this. Like, let's just say you have this house in its own LLC, but you don't respect the LLC. The rents are just going into your personal account. You're paying bills out of your personal account. You're not funneling. If someone wanted to sue that LLC, they may have a claim to kind of reach beyond that LLC to other assets if you haven't respected the structure of that LLC, during, the years prior. So you just want to make sure that it's still all your money again at the end of the day, but just do the work and run it through the entity so that you've, limited your liability as it was designed to do.
And this is a little more off topic than this maybe, but in that same scenario, I had it where there was no mortgage and they retitled it in an LLC, and I forget if it was husband and wife and then the LLC was just the husband, or if it was just the husband bought and then they put the LLC in both names, but that little deed transfer erased title insurance because it wasn't the same as the original title, like the member ownership, and so then they had a title issue when they went and sold it, and essentially they thought they had title insurance because you're told title insurance lasts the whole time.
Yeah.
And they didn't have title insurance. So. Yeah. Or make it with samesies.
Yeah, and then I think the only other thing that I'll just mention, I mean, and Todd and I talked about it too. I mean, we talked about being diversified, right? And that's just not having all your eggs in one basket. Obviously, you guys are in a unique position because you have such close access to real estate, and there's a ton of people that have built a tremendous amount of wealth through real estate. But I think it's also prudent to, recognize the fact that you're in it, your paychecks are dependent on it. Maybe you don't want to have all your investments in real estate as well. So having some kind of retirement plan, where you're in stocks and bonds and things that aren't as sexy as, rental houses, working for you. Because over time, I mean, there's a lot of volatility that comes with investing in stocks and lately bonds too. But over time, there are returns to be had in those markets as well. So,
well, guys, we talk a lot in Hometown U as well about trying to treat this career like it's a real job. Like you show up at a certain time and you leave at a certain time. You try to treat this business and your finances as if it's a real job. And your taxes come out of your paycheck and your retirement comes out of your paycheck. That's why we say when you get a paycheck, take 30% out of it. Like, yeah, you're overestimating. Maybe you can bonus yourself at the end of the year. Like if you try to set it up as its own little machine, then you're treating it like a real job and a real profession, not just like a hobby.
Right.
Yeah, and in terms of the machine, you set me up with Gusto. You want to tell them about Gusto or payroll systems?
Yeah, so when you're an S Corp, you have to run those paychecks. I mean, you get a real pay stub, which is very foreign for you all that are self-employed, but there's a number of different providers that help with that. They're kind of a commodity, you pay them anywhere from $25 to $40 a month, just depending on the service. But it takes the payroll piece off your plate and runs it just like clockwork. So that's not an area that you want to try to do on your own. It's just too administrative
and it pays your withholdings.
It pays, that's right.
It makes you a W-2 employee, and it sends out and pays your withholdings.
That's right. So on the wage piece, you are having taxes withheld just like you were going to work at Canal Capital, or somewhere else as an employee. So you're kind of forced to pay in monthly, some amount based on that W-2 salary, but then you're still responsible in this example for taxes on the other $34,000 that wasn't rolling through payroll.
When can you get at that other $34,000? You got to wait till the end of the year or anytime?
Anytime. It's your money. Hopefully that's the source of funding the IRAs and doing other things that you want to do with that. But it's your money, still all your money. It's just you've created a divide between wages and profits of that.
And the difference, that's like the distribution, right? So the difference is if you use it on something that's not deductible, you just know that that's the case. Like you can still use the same card, it's just not a deductible expense.
That's exactly right. So you can get to it at any time. You can sweep it all out to zero every single month, you can take the W-2 and take the distribution down to zero, but you know, you wanna just make sure you're leaving enough in your business to cover the next month's payroll, because that shouldn't stop.
Or that, like piercing the bail thing or whatever, to take those under distributions, is there anything like you should not do, or not pay out of that? You want, it doesn't need to be like a regular amount, or a regular time.
No, I mean, I would just say, you know, just like kind of respecting the LLC structure, you know, pay the business expenses from the business, you know, take the distribution personally, don't go pay a bunch of personal stuff from those profits, shift the money over to yourself personally,
Right.
and then pay your bills.
I have a couple of friends of mine, say they're in their late 20s and they're on my team and they do a good job selling real estate, and they should probably look at setting something up like this. Who do they talk to? How do they start? Do they go talk to you? Should we talk to somebody at Canal Capital? Who should they talk to? Like if they want to set up an S corporation, get their crap organized and start doing it this way.
Yeah,
How do you start?
so first kind of hurdle is you gotta have a path to making, you know, 60 to 80 regularly. You know, just because you had one good year, you do not want to go through the administrative costs of setting all this stuff up for one good year. So you gotta know you're in it, you're committed to it, like this is going to be your career. And then it's really simple. I mean, you're thinking about an LLC name, like what do you want your business name to be? And then, you know, call me, we register it on the SCC site, make the tax election to be taxed as an S corp. I usually recommend that folks, you know, set up a separate bank account, get QuickBooks, kind of legitimize all of this, you know, and then it's on autopilot.
Yeah, it doesn't cost like anything to set up a new bank account. It just helps you organize your crap. Like that's, even if you don't have an S corporation or an LLC, having a bank account for your business, just nicknaming it for your business and then your personal is good to make those transfers and pay for them from separate accounts.
Right, and then at tax time, you know, you're not scrambling like,
Pressure,
oh my gosh,
yeah.
what do I deduct? I can't find any deductions because they're commingled with all your personal stuff.
Yeah, the one thing I remember that caught me off guard was creating the LLC was easy, creating a bank account was easy, but to get Hometown to pay the LLC, we have to then get that LLC recognized by D-Corp.
Yeah, you gotta get a new
gotta go
license.
through and get the LLC recognized as essentially a licensed real estate agent before you start getting paid
Got it.
for those.
Probably have to figure out, fill out a new W-9.
You just gotta get your ID number and yeah.
Or a DBA, like there's.
Yeah, but I mean,
D-Corp stuff.
this S corp structure is nothing unique to real estate. Like
Right.
Canal Capital is an S corp too. We do the exact same thing. We pay wages and we pay profits. You know, I mean, there's Hometown Realty is in itself is an S corp. You know, it's not unique to just you as realtors. It's just one tool that you can also use for running your own businesses. You know, to save some money in taxes.
Going off that, and Abby, continuing here, so if, let's say like you've been in the real estate game for like 5 years, you haven't set this up yet, you wanna go buy a house, how does this, like, if you don't have an S corp or an LLC, how does that change like your qualifying income, or if you need to refinance?
So just because you changed your tax filing, you still have the history of employment.
Okay.
We just calculate the years separately. So yeah, you'd be fine with the history of employment if you have a Schedule C 1 year and an S corp the next year. If you're in for 5+ years, we really only need 1 year tax return. So that could be the S corp, and we don't even have to look at the Schedule C. So.
So what you're saying, it doesn't really like help you or hurt you one way or the other?
Yeah,
It's
you
just-
still have that employment history.
Okay.
You just change how you're taking your income. Yeah.
Mar, were you just trying to confirm like you don't need the S corp for like 2 years to qualify kind of thing? Is that what?
Like
Yeah.
a refinance.
Because I think that some of the best advice Margaret gives me, and she reminds me of often, it's still all your money. Like it's looked at differently in the eyes of
Right.
the IRS.
Right. Yeah, to your point, you still made 70,000 in that example. It just got paid via 2 different, you know, ways. So.
Looks like you want to shotgun, huh? Rodney,
Excuse me?
you want to shotgun after this? Now that you know it's all your money?
Yeah, whatever.
Rodney, how much profits you got accumulated in that account? No.
I don't know. I'm waiting till December 31st to figure that out.
Can I come?
Yeah, I mean, this is a really simplified example, but, and another question I've got is like, can I deduct more things if I do one way or the other, and it's, the deductions are the same, you know, it's whatever you're spending on your real estate business. It's deductible kind of under both regimes, so that part doesn't change. But what can change is those retirement plans and what your options are, it's just a little bit of a different strategy, just depending on what you've chosen.
One more thing, Mara, and I guess talking of, when people say when to do it, when you're trying to get a mortgage, the cleanest way and the best way to do it is at the start of the year, because what you don't wanna happen is you're paying yourself a W-2, and we calculate that W-2, but it doesn't matter if you've been paying yourself for 6 months, we have to divide that W-2 by 12. So if you do it in the middle of the year, your qualifying income is gonna be less because we're taking, you know, 15,000 over 12 months rather than 30,000 over 12 months. So the cleanest way to do it if you're trying to qualify for a loan would be at, you know, the start of the year. Yeah.
We can't hire our kids, can we hire our wives? Or significant other?
You can, but the thing you lose is your wife's income gets taxed at the same rate that yours does. So you don't really get a real savings, you're just kind of almost paying a little bit more in FICA taxes. So doesn't really work the same way. Where I see husband and wife like work out really well is if you got a couple that
Ben and Kevin register as husband and wife.
that's right.
Love you, man.
Is if you both, you're just crushing it, and both husband and wife want to be on payroll of the S corp to be able to put away like $100,000+ a year into their retirement plans. You know, good problems to have, but that is the situation where it does make sense.
Yeah, I added my wife, and you have to have her on for 2 years before she can make a set contribution. So I did it so that I can put money in her SEP plus my SEP, and essentially increase my SEP amount. But even though it's percentage based, it's also her pay and my pay.
And you're still paying a little bit in FICA taxes for her to be able to do that. You know.
But to that point now, she actually has a Social Security that
Yeah.
she could have.
Right.
You know.
That's a good point. Yep. Everybody ready to just
In terms of the diversification that even kind of looking at this for like the tax-free money in retirement, I mean, it's the only option is Roth,
yes.
right? Like,
HSA and Roth.
oh, HSA,
Yeah, so that's a health savings account, or if you're on a high deductible health plan. Arguably, that's even better. Is everybody familiar with the health savings account? You know, if you're, you
as
can
an
put,
investment tool, probably not many people, but.
yeah, so a great strategy, if you could afford it, is to fund the HSA and try not to touch it. Still pay your medical expenses out of pocket and allow that HSA to grow, because think about it, money goes in pre-tax to the HSA. It grows tax-free, and when you withdraw it to use for Medicare and insurance down the road, it also comes out tax-free. So it is very, very powerful. It's just you can't put $50,000 in there, you know, but you could put, you know, 7 or 8, yeah, 7 or 8 a year, and try to grow that. You can invest your HSA, and then the Roth, you know, it's you don't get a tax deduction for that, so compared to the HSA, kind of slightly better, slightly worse, because you do get one for the contributions to the HSA, but it also grows tax-free, and withdrawals in retirement are tax-free. So those are kind of the two best buckets, if you will.
Yeah, and the HSA, if you save your receipts, you basically pull money out of it.
Yeah.
Anytime you want, you don't have to wait for it.
Yep. But you know, you're gonna have, I mean, we're going to have those healthcare costs in retirement, even if it's just our Medicare premiums, you know, that need to be paid. So there's gonna be other reasons why, you know, in your 50s and 60s, you know, 70s, whenever you're retired, you're gonna need this bucket of money that's kind of dedicated to medical expenses. It's going to exist.
The minimum withdrawals, is that like age 70, is that for all of these, or?
So the Roth IRA, yeah, so what Tommy's referring to is when you turn 73, you have to start taking money out of your IRAs, your retirement plans. The one exception is the Roth IRA. You never have an R&D, required minimum distribution from your Roth IRA. Another reason why it's so powerful, because that can essentially, throughout your 70s and 80s and however long, continue to grow tax-free. The other ones, you have to start taking money out. And usually it works out to be about 4% of the value of the account in the early years. But you know, it can be sizable just depending on how much you save.
So the guy that waited till 70 and he only got 2 payments, why was that?
He died.
That's what I thought.
Yeah, he died.
Just clarifying.
His whole goal was, and so that brings up another question. Think about Social Security. The earliest you can claim Social Security is 62, but you can wait until 70 to start Social Security. And your benefit grows at like 8% each year that you wait. So there's a huge advantage if you have other assets to live off of waiting close to 70 to take Social Security. But like, you know, Social Security is one of those things, you know, poor Jim, you know, who passed away, like, had he known that he was only going to live to 70 in 2 months, he would have been so much better off taking it at 62. He just
What happens to that money? Doesn't that go to the family?
No.
Moral of the story.
There you go.
Yeah.
Get that Social Security is big.
Take it out.
If like you're divorced,
Take
you
one
take the
check.
person you divorced from, you take their Social Security, or if they pass away, you take the other person.
It's a survivor benefit.
You basically grab whichever is the biggest pot of money, even across divorce and pension and stuff. Yeah, you can take your ex's Social Security before he takes it. And you don't, he doesn't have to know that you're taking his benefit.
I mean, because like if you put that on paper, and I mean, let's just say there's a Social Security benefit of like $3,000 a month. You know, you get your statement like every 10 years, but I think every 50 they send it to you every 5 years. Maybe even more frequently than that. You know, but it's not uncommon to have, if you've worked for a long amount of time, to have a benefit that's going to be $3,500 a month. You know, I mean, somewhere between $2,500 and $3,500. If you put that on paper, I mean, that's a huge amount of money over a normal kind of life expectancy that you're going to get in those monthly checks. So, you know, nobody knows the last time they're going to collect the check, but you kind of work in probabilities, and you know, you live your life and you try to wait it kind of as long as you can in favor of these larger benefits for the rest of your life.
Just take it off. Just take it off to the wise man.
All right, any last questions, Rodney?
Nope, all covered.
You're going to the Social Security office and you're not 60.
No, not yet.
Thank you, Margaret. This was awesome. We appreciate it.